The Hoka Mach 6, the successor to our Mach series shoe lineup. Is this successor a flop, or is this the best thing I've ever run with? Let's talk about it. So before we begin, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed watching the content, thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Strava for all sorts of other updates and other things like that. So without further ado, let's begin. Specs for the shoe right here on the corner, but we're going to go over it since this will be a first impressions discussion on the Mach 6. So, disclaimer right off the rip, I have run in the Mach 4, Mach 5, and the Mach X prior to this shoe, and I've had my thoughts and opinions on them, and I'll kind of recap them as we go along in this video, comparatively speaking to the Mach 6. And no, this is not meant to be entirely a comparison to its predecessors. I may reference it at times. I will have a separate video for that when the time comes. But right off the rip, specs worth noting. Again, the heel of this shoe is about 37 millimeters with a forefoot about 32 millimeters, giving it the same 5 millimeter offset that the Mach lineup tends to have, except this shoe is going to have a higher stack height than the Mach 5 and the Mach 4 respectively in this kind of case. Other things to note: we do have our standard kind of mesh that Hoka's using on the Mach series shoe, just more or less, just covering the entire duration of the shoe. We have a very similar style gusseted tongue and shoelace pattern in this Mach series shoe as the predecessors as well. And yeah, that's kind of just some of the general pieces here. I don't believe there's a carbon plate to this shoe, or any sort of plate for that matter. I don't think, other than the Mach X, that there was a plate that was tested and, in my opinion, was not liked, not enjoyed. I did not like the ride of that shoe whatsoever. So that was just kind of my 2 cents there. The main difference, of course, in this style shoe, we got two major ones, of course, is that we have just all the way across, it's this EVA foam that Hoka's been using in the previous models with the Mach 5. So essentially what I think, if I had to compare it, and I guess the last thing before we get to the comparison, is now that we have rubber on the bottom of the shoe, which was not a commonplace for the Mach series as I remember it previously. For example, like in the Mach 5, as you can see, I ran this thing down not even to the bones, but into the muscles of this shoe, where it was just, just the foam was exposed, and that was the only element of the shoe. Whereas here, we got some rubber going on, right? So, I had to run with this shoe for a little bit longer, and I wanted to also check out some other shoe reviews online before I wanted to say anything about this, just as more or less a sanity check. And the things I was mostly checking here was this. Initial fit of this shoe was unbelievably tight for my standard, and I'm only saying this because, again, with like the Mach 4 and the Mach 5, it was usually nice and snug, like in the arch area, and then the toe box was typically running kind of wide, and it gave me a little bit of room to play around with, and I actually really enjoyed that about the Mach series shoes, because after a while, your foot impact into the ProFly and the insole of the shoe would eventually like mesh into your foot, and then you would have kind of like that snug glove feel whenever you would run. You'd be able to grab the ground with like your midfoot, your forefoot, and your toes, and just like that unison pattern that you would be looking for. Whereas here, it was so tight in the toe box, I thought for a moment that I had picked the wrong size shoe. And based on what I was seeing on other reviews, I guess this is just a Hoka problem, where their sizing, whether it's true to size and whatnot, is highly inconsistent across all their models. So it is strange to me that, in the Mach 4 and the Mach 5, the fits were like right where I wanted them, and then their next successor model was just like totally missed the ball there. At least that's what I initially thought. By my third, fourth, fifth run in this shoe, I think I got the fit kind of figured out. The shoe started taking more shape of my foot, but initial, first run, I was bringing my Puma DV8 Nitro 2s with me, just because I was like, oh man, like if this run's not going to work, at least let me change into like a daily trainer that will work, right? So that's going to be one of my concerns, was like initial fit. How did it work? Is this going to be a problem we can overcome later on, right? So that was case number one. Second thing to consider, no ProFly Plus or ProFly on this shoe. It was just running straight EVA. And that ultimately felt like a transition from like the Nike Pegasus Turbo and Turbo 2 also to like a React shoe, right? So you lost this super, I would say, reactive kind of spongy foam, and in a manufacturing sense, you made it very simple by having it just one foam across the shoe that was a more reliable, durable foam with rubber protecting it. So as a result, I think what happened is, this is just my opinion, speed was ultimately traded off as a daily trainer for longer durability of the shoe. And that's also including the rubber here, because as we can probably assume, the rubber is going to prevent the shoe from dying at like 200 miles like the Mach 5 did, right? This is like 200, 250 miles, and like breaking the shoe in to look like that is really something for the price point and the style shoe it is, right? So I'm nowhere near about 20, 25 miles right now, and like you can see, we're in really good shape right across the board. In both shoes, nothing really interesting to kind of report on them, as you can see. Just a little bit of wear and tear on the foam that's just kind of exposed in between the rubber pieces. Mostly, I would say, it's pretty equal across both shoes, but like you can see where I have like some cracking here and there as you know, I'm experimenting with more of a midfoot strike, so my strike zones on the shoe are like more here rather than like this aggressive forefoot strike. So I digress. We'll talk about form a little bit more later. But yeah, so tightness of the shoe is weird. The ride itself, like, I guess it still has a little bit of snap like the Mach 4 and the Mach 5 had, but there was just something really exciting about the Mach 4 and the Mach 5 with that ProFly, with the way the shoe was a little bit wider in the toe box, just with the overall, is spongy the word I'm looking for? Maybe it's like spongy kind of bounciness to it that was present, whereas this shoe is not as spongy. It's got a little bit more stiffness because we're using EVA all the way across the board, and we have the rubber, which kind of also reduces that squish. I guess we can say, I just can't think of the right words. Maybe sponginess is the way to go, but we kind of lose some of that for that durability and a little more. Yeah, it's the durability, and it's just going to be the overall, I guess, like stiffness of the shoe that kind of comes back. And some people I know like that. I'm kind of indifferent to it right now, but knowing what I know about the Mach 4 and the Mach 5, and then you kind of have a successor in your shoe lineup that isn't the same way, it's kind of just like, oh, well, that sucks. And that's kind of where we're at now with it, right? So, again, like I said, I was checking out some other channels, what they thought, and I guess we all kind of come to the same conclusion. Well, not everyone comes to the same conclusion. That was probably what I liked about it, is that some people really enjoy it and think, yeah, I can get a lot of speed out of this. Some people are just like totally done with this model and will only stick to the Mach 5. I might be somewhere in between there, just only because, again, maybe as like your average runner, you might put this on and be like, yeah, daily run, you know, I got it. Or you could be somebody who like reviews shoes way more frequently than I do, and you have all these other test cases, and you put this thing on and you go, yeah, this isn't it. Like, maybe we go with Asics, or maybe we're going with Puma or Nike. Like, it's hard to say exactly, but from my perspective right now, like, I think I would lean more for the camp of like, the Mach 5 was probably still a better shoe in terms of ride and just quality ride. But if you're looking for that durability, I think this shoe is still probably in that camp. If you're trying to spend less and just go longer for a slower pace, but for a longer distance, this could be the trade-off versus something like the Mach 5, which will go 200 miles maximum before you start really tearing it down and putting it into a weird spot, if you kind of catch my drift. So that's where I think I want to leave the assessment at. It's too soon to say if the shoe is really good or really bad at this time. I just know initially, with the way the shoe fit, I thought this was going to be like a disaster. And it really didn't end up being a disaster. I just needed to break it in and just kind of get comfortable with it. But whether it's going to be the new daily trainer that's going to replace my Puma Deviate Nitros, that I have currently in my lineup, because they're like at like 300, 350 miles right now, so it's time to kind of consider options. Like, I don't know if this is going to be the daily trainer that's going to be able to handle the same load that those Pumas were handling during the course of my spring training. But too soon to tell. Once we get to about 50, maybe 100 miles, I'll kind of have a better idea of what we're doing with the Mach 6. If not, maybe I just don't break into the Hoka brand again and we just try to deviate back to Puma pun intended, I guess. And we'll kind of see what happens from there. So if you agree or disagree with this assessment, let me know in the comments. But yeah, this is kind of where I'm standing at my first initial thoughts with the Mach 6. So I guess we're going to leave it there. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.